Okay, looks like we're in the webinar.
Yep.
Uh, okay, am I sharing my screen? No,
Uh,
not yet.
don't see the screen yet.
Okay, let me go ahead and share. 1, 2, 3. Probably shouldn't do this, but I think I'm going to share just the presentation here. Does that look good?
That looks good. I see it.
Excellent. Okay.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. Thank you for joining us today. Today we have Daniel Brown joining us. He is a senior consultant here at Improving. He will be leading the discussion. Before I hand the mic over to you, Daniel, I wanted to let everyone know, our viewers, we have a Q&A feature located on the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions at any point, be sure to post them and Daniel will be sure to answer them. All right, now without any further delay, Daniel, take it away.
Sure thing. Absolutely. Before I start, I do want to give a quick shout out to my colleague, Jim Walters, that's harvesting cranberries up in northern Wisconsin. May the gales of November not come early for you, sir, and may you guys get done as quickly as possible. Thanks. All right. Okay, so deconstructing the DevOps hype. Thank you so much for showing up. As mentioned, my name is Daniel Brown. I'm a senior consultant at Improving. I'm a certified solutions architect at the professional level. I'm a DevOps engineer, cloud migration specialist. I put that on there because that seems like all I've done for the last 3 years. Cutter of grass and kudzu, lots of kudzu impeding on my yard at various times of the year. It's dying back a little bit now. Washer of dishes and changer of diapers. That's me. Every job's important. Okay, so what is DevOps? Is it a methodology? Is it a product? Is it a best practice, a culture, a role? Is it a paradigm for collaboration? What exactly is DevOps? I mean, can we put it in a box or get some kind of wrap our minds around it? I think that the way to look at this, and this is kind of how I've thought about this, is we need to put DevOps, kind of look at it through individual lenses to kind of get an idea of the aspects of DevOps, and then we can kind of sum it all together. But first off, let me ask this question. Is it DevOps or is it DevSecOps? To security or not to security? Well, I mean, security is like air, right? Do we want security? Oh, absolutely we do. Yeah, security is good. And it's like, do you want no security? Oh, no, we don't want no security. We definitely want it. So when DevOps was first proposed, they had development and operations kind of amalgamated to create the term. More recently, DevSecOps seems to be more of the progressive foot forward term. I'm going to say that I will use these terms interchangeably. I will probably say DevOps more just because it's easier to say DevOps, and also it's maybe a more mainstream term. But I think putting security into the equation is always a good thing. So it's not a problem with that. Okay, so what is DevOps? And let's look at it through these different lenses. Or I'll put it this way. Each company or organizations, they all take different approaches to DevOps. So let's kind of look at these different approaches. DevOps as a culture. I call this the holistic approach. Basically, DevOps is a culture, a doctrine, a philosophy, a way of believing. It's putting the development team and the operations team together as one team. It's all of us together, not us versus them. Every team is responsible for the whole process. This is what you have when you have DevOps as a culture. Now you say, okay, all right, well, we don't have DevOps really, not really, but we do have Agile. How does DevOps go with Agile? Does it clash with Agile? In my opinion, DevOps is the perfect companion to Agile. And in some ways, I think that DevOps kind of picked up where Agile left off. So I have this picture. It's like the business, the software team is being led by the business. That's the Agile part. That is the interaction with the business. And then the DevOps is following the lead, because we're trying to deliver. If you're writing software, unless you're writing for an open source project or something, you're writing software to help the business, to help generate profit, to help do some things for the business, to help them be more effective, or run, maybe even just run the business. The way I kind of look at Agile versus DevSecOps or DevOps is that they're really two different sides of the coin. Agile is how dev teams interact with the customers. So it's really external facing. It might be that the dev team really doesn't interact with the customer themselves, but they interact with the business. They interact with the people that are determining what needs to be built and the business reason why those things need to be built. So project managers, business analysts, it might be the customer directly, but most cases probably not exactly. The DevSecOps is really, or DevOps, is really about how the various IT teams interact with each other. So you have development, which might be software developers and QA people, and maybe data people also. Also, you have operations people that are maybe systems, network engineers, infrastructure people, could be data people too, and operations, depending on how the data person is slanted, whether they're kind of admin or developer type. But it's internal focus. So Agile, external focus, DevSecOps, DevOps, internal focus. Perfect marriage though. The idea is to have everybody working together. Several years ago, when I worked for a company called Ed Financial, this was back in 2006, 2007, we started to adopt Agile principles. And I remember how well it worked for our software development, how happy people were, how we could kind of measure velocity. We could get a clear sense of what the business needed and organize ourselves. However, the disconnect always seemed to be with operations. The IT infrastructure department that actually managed our physical data center, on-prem physical data center, we didn't have a very strong bond with them. So anytime there needed to be some cooperation between development and operations, it was almost the high manager goes to the high manager to talk. And that is totally anti-DevSecOps or DevOps. You really need everybody on the teams collaborating and talking to each other. That's kind of how a DevOps culture looks. It's about collaboration. It's about communication. So let's look at the next thing in the lens. DevOps is a role. Oh my gosh. And I call this the champion approach. If you go look at ads for, software people that are wanted, one of the hot positions right now seems to be DevOps engineers. We want a DevOps engineer. We want a DevOps manager. What does that even mean? How does that work? What are companies seeking? In my opinion, I think they're seeking really somebody to implement DevOps with this DevOps as a role. They have operations people, they have developers, and maybe these people are very specialized in what they do. So they're trying to get somebody to bring somebody in to glue them together, to stand in the gap, to implement the things that need to happen for DevOps to happen, whatever that is. The one problem with kind of DevOps as a role, in my opinion, is we don't want to ever absolve everybody from responsibility. We don't want to say, oh, that's DevOps, so the DevOps engineer is going to handle it. Just like we don't want to say, oh, testing, that's QA. Developers don't test. They just throw the code over. They don't. That's why we have a QA team. That's why we pay them. user acceptance testing. No, we gave you the requirements. Just you guys test it, QA test it. Or data. Oh, we don't write our own stored procedures. That's for the data team. They'll write them and we just call them. That's a very old hat kind of philosophy on how to do things, but you still see it prevalent in different places. But that's kind of how I see DevOps as a role, that looking through that lens of the champion approach. DevOps as a tool. I call this the companion approach. This is one I think that's touted by a lot of companies that create DevOps software. This is basically saying, oh, you want to do DevOps? You need to buy our product. You need to use these specialized tools that enable automation of manual processes. So some things like GitHub, or Git, or Azure DevOps. Oh yeah, well, hey, you want to do DevOps, you got to have source control, and you probably should have cloud managed source control. You shouldn't be managing Git on your own, or you shouldn't be using some kind of homegrown source control server. Or Terraform. Oh my gosh, we need to build infrastructure. So you need Terraform. Come on over. And containers. Oh, well, containers sound very DevOps. So let's put everything in a Docker container. Let's just strip our web servers and stick it in a Docker container. And then these containers, let's run them on Kubernetes. Yeah, that's DevOps. We got these tools in place. We're doing DevOps. Maybe not. Okay, so let's look at another lens. DevOps is a practice, the process approach. I kind of put this one last because I think a lot of people might look at this and say, oh, that's it. That's DevOps right there. So Agile software development, version control, we talked about these things, some of these things that are tools. CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery, or continuous deployment, which is it? Microservices, infrastructure as code, configuration management, monitoring and logging. We're talking, real more sophisticated monitoring and logging than the old days, more than just kind of looking at the logging on the web server, but how do we pull these logs out and analyze them in some kind of bulk fashion? I think this is, I kind of see this as sacraments. Well, DevOps is as sacraments. So if we do enough of these best practices, if we do enough of these preferred things, then we're doing DevOps. And I don't think that's the correct way of looking at it. Maybe it is to some extent, but if you are doing things that are supposed to be DevOps best practices, but you don't know why you're doing them, then you're probably not doing DevOps. Like, for instance, containers. I mentioned containers in the last slide. If you're moving everything to containers and you don't understand why are you doing it? Is it because it's the best new thing? Maybe that's the reason why. But but why? Why is the reason? What is going to make you more effective by having these websites or these applications in containers versus how you have them right now? If you don't know, then maybe you're not doing DevOps, or maybe you're not getting to the heart of what DevOps is. So which approach is correct? So I mentioned a couple of these different approaches, and how does it all kind of fit together? Well, I would say that if you had to choose one of those approaches, I would choose DevOps as a culture. It really is about collaboration of teams at a high and low level, at all levels. And it really is about a change in thinking for the whole organization. But that's a dramatic pause on the but there. But really, to be able to do DevOps effectively, you have to be able to utilize a little bit of each approach, I think. So yeah, you have DevOps as your mindset. But if you're not actually implementing anything, doing anything, then you're just talking. And I've seen this happen in Agile plenty of times, where people are talking about Agile practices talking about doing things, but then they're not actually doing it. That is a very much a problem. Also, tools. I mean, you could do DevOps without any advanced tools, but do you really want to have all of your DevOps running as PowerShell scripts or Bash scripts and just maintaining libraries of it? Heck no, you don't want to do that. It's better to have a pipeline tool, and preferably one that's built into the source control, like, you know, Azure DevOps pipelines, like GitHub Actions. But I'm going to back off on that a little bit. There are a lot of standalone CI/CD tools that are great, like Jenkins and Travis. So I don't want to start a religious war here, but having a good tool makes all the difference in the world. Having somebody that's a champion for DevOps is important too. You can tell your developers and your operations people, you need to work together. You need to figure this DevOps thing out. But if you don't give them any time, you don't make anybody a champion to help with it, then it may never get done because nobody's been designated to make sure that it gets done. And I see that all the time, where there's lip service on infrastructure and process improvement, but then when it really comes down to it, it's like, no, we need more trinkets. We need more of the shiny features. Also, these practices, I mean, doing things like CI/CD, you need to incorporate these into your DevOps approach. So can you give us a comprehensive definition of DevOps, Daniel? Oh, maybe I will in a second. I forgot, I have this one more slide. This is kind of an aside. So much of what happens with CEOs and executives and people that are trying to implement DevOps from the top down is they have this kind of golden ticket fallacy. And I see this happen all the time with hot things that come out in IT, whether it be DevOps or it be modern data or machine learning. Oh my gosh, machine learning, that sounds great. That way the machines can learn and we can just lay all our employees off and we can just have the machines create everything, right? We need to get away from this idea that if we adopt DevOps, it'll be one simple and it'll solve all our problems. The truth is adopting DevOps is hard, and you may not see the profit until you go through step 2, which is the hard work to get there. Okay, so definition of DevOps, here's where we're going. Okay, so DevOps is, I found this definition on Reddit too, and I would have attributed it to somebody, but I think it didn't really have a strong attribution. So DevOps is a combination of specific practices, culture change, and tools intended to shorten the software development lifecycle by reducing the time between committing a change to the system and it being continuously delivered into normal production, while ensuring high quality and reliability. So basically, it's what I said just a second ago. You have to have practices. You have to have a change in culture. You really need some tools. And this one doesn't have champion, but really you need somebody to implement it. And it could be somebody on your team. Maybe you don't have to go hire a DevOps engineer, but maybe you need to hire somebody, but maybe you need to get somebody on your team to say, hey, you know, can you go look at Azure DevOps, and we want to put all our packages and artifacts. Can you go figure out how that works? Or we really need some automated builds because these builds are killing us. As an aside, I was talking about this before. It always drives me crazy, and I've been on a couple software teams like this, where you have like a room full of every smart IT person in the company sitting around a conference table, and they're all sitting there for the deployment to production. And it's like, what are we doing here, guys? We're killing ourselves. We're wasting everybody's time on something that should be automated, something that should be pretty straightforward. And all these smart people that are here, they ought to be over somewhere else solving problems instead of trying to do something that we do every 2 weeks or every week or every month. Hopefully sooner, hopefully not more than every month. That'd be bad. If you're releasing every 6 months, ooh, that's a problem. You need to maybe call Improving and we'll help you. Plug there for the company. Okay, right. So speaking of plug for the company, plug for one of my fellow consultants, John Ruzick. This is John Ruzick, principal consultant at the Atlanta office of Improving. Very smart guy. He kind of sums it up to this: success in DevOps, and he shows what it looks like. Success in DevOps means that you have almost no human interaction between building, upgrading, maintaining, monitoring, alerting, and fixing your software environments. I think that's it. Look, I mean, there's things that need to happen that are predictable. And if they're predictable, they're easy. Why are human beings doing it? Why aren't we automating them? That's what we need to be thinking about DevOps. So let's talk a little bit about what it means to, what are some things that, what does it look like to not be doing DevOps? If you have an army of ops professionals that need to constantly stare at a dashboard to monitor the health of your servers, you're probably not doing DevOps. If you're manually testing, building, and deploying code, you're not doing DevOps. If the ops and dev teams don't talk, you are not doing DevOps for sure. If there's no communication flowing, that is a problem. You can't say you're doing DevOps when people aren't talking. If you don't have environments that can build, be torn down, rebuilt, scaled up, scaled out, scaled down based on changing conditions, you may not be doing DevOps. So, you know, this is probably a little bit of a high standard, but this is kind of where we're getting to. It really is, there's dreams when it comes to DevOps. And there's not really a destination, unfortunately. I kind of liken it to this. I kind of liken it to the river. So I'm a kayaker, and I'm not a whitewater kayaker. I would say about class 2 is kind of top of my rung. I don't really go much higher than that because I'm not crazy, and because I have a family, and I don't have good enough life insurance. There's a lot of reasons why. But anyway, when you start out your journey in DevOps, you're probably going to be in the rapids. When rivers start out in the mountains, they come out rapid, you know, or at least they're flowing downhill at a quicker rate. They're going over rocks. It may look as stark as it does on the left, but by the time the river flows a little farther downstream, you start to see this calm. And this is how the Chattahoochee River is in Atlanta over here, especially below Buford Dam. As you get further from the dam and closer to town, it's very serene. It's very calm. It's almost a little bit lazy at times. You know, you don't even know that you're really moving, or you're moving so slow. Or sometimes you think, well, I better paddle because I'm moving so slow. But this is how you want to be with DevOps. You're not necessarily going to get there, as in like arrive at a destination immediately, or maybe not ever. Maybe you're going to be on that river for forever, but you can get to a point where it's calm, where the builds are going well, where production's not getting messed up, where the settings are perfect, where you're not having servers that are running out of memory because you've addressed that. You've gone through those rapids and you've figured out the more mature process. This calm river is the definition of done. It is the more mature process. Is there a snag that might come up? Yes. Is there is it possible that you might hit some shoals and you have to like go over or something? Yes, it's very possible. But this is where you want to get to, the calm river with DevOps. This is your definition of done, is that things have calmed down enough that you're lazily cruising down the river instead of going through whitewater praying to whichever deity you like, or science, or whatever you want to save you. Okay, let's distill it down. Let's talk about DevOps. Let's just distill it. See, we got whiskey, we got some whiskey barrels and some whiskey stills there. Let's talk about DevOps there. What does it really mean? 3 points. I think these are 3 things. Communication, 1, you have to have the teams talking to each other. 2, process improvement. 3, automation. So I put process improvement ahead of automation, and process improvement and automation may go together, but not necessarily. I put it as a separate thing because process improvement may just be process of interaction between people. It may be that, oh, before we go to production, we need to have a quick meeting, or maybe this is how the handoff happens, if there's any handoff. It's not just me throwing it over the wall and you like, oh, I guess there's something to deploy. We want to talk about process improvement and how we can make things a little more sane, make it more like the calm river. Automation, we need to talk about what processes are so tedious or so boring that people are most likely going to mess them up. Let's automate those. Let's make sure that we do things in a way that's efficient. Okay, so question, all right, Daniel, thanks. This is good stuff. I'm glad I took my lunch to go see this. This is good. Okay, so but we haven't really made any steps toward DevOps. Where do we start? What do we do? So I think one thing you can do, if you're a reader, or maybe if you're not a reader, you can go get the audiobook. Read The Phoenix Project by Gene Kim. He talks about a very dysfunctional IT team and how they're trying to get new software into production. It's a fictional account. It's a novel. So it has a nice narrative to it. It's a story that you can follow and learn lessons. Also, there's another one that he has, and it's called, oh boy, can I? Nice. Maybe I can do this. Oh, I'll fiddle with this a little longer. Oh, wait, there it is. It's called Unicorn Project. Unicorn Project is basically the other side of the coin from Phoenix Project. Phoenix Project's more from the ops team point of view. The Unicorn Project's more from the development team point of view. So both of them together, you get a very good picture. If you have to read one, probably Phoenix Projects is sufficient, but read both if you like. The other thing you can do is evangelize the IT department with the principles of DevOps and make a commitment to DevOps and process improvement. Understanding the why, that's something that, as IT professionals, we should always strive to learn. I remember there was a dev manager very early on in my career that said, we have to understand what we're going to fix before we fix it. If you don't understand the problem, then don't start coding. Because that's our thing, especially when we're in crisis, is we always want to present, we always want to go attack. What's the problem? Let's go, I'm gonna go fix that. But to truly understand the problem is what makes the fix worthwhile and makes it actually work. Are there any questions? I saw there was a thing pop up on the chat, so.
Hey, as of now, there's not. That was just me posting the 2 books that you mentioned, the Unicorn Project, the Phoenix Project.
Thank you very much, Jordan. I appreciate you, sir.
Absolutely.
So also he also has a book called the DevOps Handbook, and I've got it, and it's a lot less accessible. It has a lot of, I would say it's a little bit more academic, harder to digest. I think use something like I think if you want to talk about just CI/CD, not really DevOps, but I think this continuous delivery. Oh wait, let me see if I can. I need to go pull it up on my thing. Oh wait, there we go. Let's see. Oh, there we go. This continuous delivery book by Jez Humble and David Farley. I think this is a lot more accessible as far as DevOps, CI/CD kind of ideas. And I think it's still pretty relevant. This one's a little bit older, but I've had this a long time. It's a great book. But I think reading the Phoenix Project is probably a good way to approach starting your understanding of DevOps. I would build time into projects for process improvement. Okay, so, this is one of those things that it's always out there, like developers, we want to refactor our code. Business, yeah, we'll give you some time to refactor the code. Reality, never had, there's never any time to refactor. I think it's too important to establish a good process and to improve process to not build time into projects. We try to encourage people to do that as consultants whenever we're on projects, but the business always takes priority. So we just have to do the best we can with this. If you're in management, you need to be thinking about this though. Process improvement happens when there's time for process improvement to happen. That or people are working overtime to try to get it happening, and that's not fair to them to have to do that. Identify repetitive tasks, slow and tedious processes, single points of failure. My gosh, if you have one person that knows a process, script it or something, because if you have it scripted, people can go look at the script, can go look at the process for the build, and then all of a sudden you have an accurate documentation on how the build actually happens, because you're using that script to do the build, so it's up to date. The problem with documentation is it may or may not be up to date, but if you're using it to do the build, to do the deployments, to do the push to production, it's always accurate. So script those things out so that you don't have just one CI engineer that knows everything, or CM engineer. Look at, okay, so one thing about DevOps that I've thought a lot about is this area of auditing and logging. Where can you consolidate logs? Where can you automate your logging? Because the thing is I don't need to go look at application logs on all these servers. I really just need to know if certain things happen. Like, if and this is an application thing, but this is a system thing. But, if the web server's at 95%, memory, the memory usage is at 95%, maybe I need to know that, but I don't need to know all the other stuff that's happening. So figuring out where those problem areas are and having alerts that can really pinpoint and accurately tell us what's happening, tell us the story of our IT infrastructure. I think the biggest thing is take an iterative approach. So we don't need to change everything at once. We don't need to throw out our processes and have like this revolution of sorts. Revolutions are bloody and a lot of people die. You just want iterative change. You want change over time. You want things to improve. I would say start simple. Look for the low-lying fruit. What can you do to get started on the DevOps journey? What are some things that you're not doing that you ought to be doing? What are some of those things that you can do to change the culture and change the mindset? I think if you can just do that, that would be a great start. Start simple though. Okay, so I'm going to throw a wrench in things. So I've been talking about DevOps and kind of you know, I've been talking about the merits of DevOps, and I've been trying to unravel this whole thought of DevOps and what it is, and trying to exercise the myth of DevOps and the hype from what it is reality-wise. So let me ask this question. So this is something that came up, and this is kind of came up as I was developing these materials and these ideas. Is DevOps actually dead? Has platform as a service killed it? Now, it's a very interesting question because, okay, so, and I got in trouble with this. So I got in trouble when I did this talk at the Atlanta Developers Conference. I had some people kind of disagree with me a little bit. The DevOps has really is really soared in popularity, and companies have been able to do it in part because of the cloud computing. Now, not completely. You can do DevOps on-prem for sure, but the scalability part of DevOps has been really, in large part, fulfilled because of the cloud computing. So the rise in DevOps has also been, I don't know, so the rise in DevOps has also kind of mirrored the rise in cloud computing, in my opinion. That's not to say if you are on-prem that you can't do DevOps. You absolutely can. You can definitely communicate between the teams, if nothing else. But that ability to scale your infrastructure any way you want, to be able to easily script things out. Now, you can script stuff on-prem too, but scripting out the connections and network and everything, it's a lot harder to do that on-prem. Has platform as a service killed DevOps? This was the question that was in this article that I read. So the idea with, so the cloud computing platforms, what they said initially, or the way they built their platforms, is they said, we can take exactly what you have on premise and we can move it to the cloud. And you have a Linux server here, you have a Linux server in the cloud, you have a internet gateway or a NAT gateway here, you have a NAT gateway in the cloud, you know. So you have switches in the cloud, we have VPCs, we have you know, you have your VLAN that's on premise, same thing. But what the cloud has done is it has taken some of these things that these old infrastructure, and they've consolidated them. And they said, no longer do you need to worry about all of the networking and all of this stuff. Just give us the code and we'll run this for you. And you don't have to worry about how it runs. It'll just run. So you have some of that in things like Elastic Beanstalk on AWS, or you could even look at something like Lambda or functions, Lambda in AWS or functions in Azure, where you have the code just kind of gets dropped and then it can run this thing and you don't really know what it's running on or how it's running, but it runs. The platform portion of things, I don't think we're to that point yet. So is DevOps dead? Absolutely not. Because look, you still have to have, even if the platform changes, if it's simplified good, maybe you don't need as many people to work on it, but you still have to have some expertise. You still have to get the code from your IDE to the cloud provider at a very minimum. So these platforms, they're making things easier for developers. Things are changing, things are evolving. The idea that DevOps has had this meteoric rise because of cloud, but then cloud is actually killing DevOps and at the end is a very interesting idea. And it's one heck of a debate. But I think for right now, there's enough that needs to be done that you can't say that DevOps is dead. I think it is very much alive. and it may change in the way it looks moving forward, but it is very much a thing that's going to continue to be part of our culture and very much part of our vocabulary. All right, are there any questions on anything that was covered? Anything that you disagree with that that you'd like to point out, and maybe we could talk about? So I put 2 QRs. I have a QR for my LinkedIn page if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn. Also, I put a QR to the original article that I wrote for Improving's Thoughts blog that this presentation is based on. You're like, oh, wow, I could have just went and read an article in 10 minutes instead of listening to you drone on for 45. Yes, you could have, but it's bait and switch, man. So if you want to read the article, go back and look at it. There's the QR for it. Do we have any questions?
We don't have any questions at the moment. I do encourage our viewers. This is a great opportunity to post any of your DevOps questions, and Daniel will tell you how to spin up your Kubernetes cluster, no problem. But I'm a big advocate on coming from a software developer standpoint, right? What happens when you click that deployment button? A lot of people just stop there, right? They don't really know. I hit deployment, 5 minutes, it'll be on the server, right? And I think that can be like a big intimidating factor, or just like a scare factor. There's a lot that goes on, and if that's not an area you've ever kind of stepped into before, it can be a little scary or unsure. Could you speak to that at all, or maybe like suggest a way people could start to get into that very easily? I know you did talk about it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so one thing I'd like to just say is don't be intimidated. There's so much about the DevOps discipline that feels like it's esoteric. It feels like it's just, oh, well, there's people that know this and people that don't know this. I mean, look, at the end of the day, people, we're just taking code and putting it somewhere and running it. I mean, it's not that complicated. It's, you can go through a lot of different crazy iterations and gymnastics, but I would encourage anybody. I think, okay, so Jordan, I think one of the problems that we see is that traditionally, and this is the siloed approach, people did not like to share information. They felt that sharing information made them weak. Maybe it made them vulnerable to being fired or something. Oh gosh, we want to make sure and hold on to our job. I think the biggest thing that you can do is propagate a culture of openness. And I don't see anything wrong with everybody knowing the procedures. Now, maybe not knowing the passwords, if there's a couple people that are allowed to push production, yeah, maybe not, but everybody should conceptually know how it's done. And if they're given access, they should be able to do it. I don't think there's any loss in knowing all those kind of things. And I think, yeah, so if you're in management, I think you encourage openness on information. If you're an employee, say a developer, I think you open up you show your cards to people and give that information freely within your organization, of course, not outside your organization. Wasn't saying that, but I think knowledge sharing is probably the biggest thing, and people being willing to do that.
I think that's awesome. Thank you. I do a lot of DevOps on my own stuff at home, right? But when I go work with my client, there's always this level of like lockdown, right? Like secrecy. We don't want you kind of looking behind this curtain. Let us handle it. And you can kind of see like what's going on once in a while. And I think, kind of like you said, it's not really like a good practice to do it that way. Everyone should know like how your code gets onto the server, how it gets built, how it gets published, and kind of what is going on. I think that's really important. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, look, as a software developer, you say, well, I don't really need to know that. And it's like, well, maybe you do, because maybe by knowing that, you can make your code 20% more efficient, maybe not, but maybe you think, oh, well, if I do this, this will make it easier for the next person downstream. But if you don't know, then you're not going to be able to do those things.
Or
You're
if
not going to.
or if something goes wrong on Christmas Eve, right? You have to. I don't know how the builds work. I'm not gonna step in, or someone has to though. Someone has to get out there and help out.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that was fun, this was a week ago or two, we had put in some auto scaling stuff for one of the clients, and we had a certificate that needed to be updated, or a couple certificates that needed to be updated on these machines. And rather than logging into the machine, pulling in the certificate and everything, I actually went in and just fired up I uploaded the new certificates to the storage, to the secure store. And then I just fired up new machines, and they had the certificates already installed on them, ran automated tests to make sure they were there. And then I just killed the old machines. So we just cycled the new machines in, no problem. And my client was like, well, okay, it's like all right, do we need to, are you going to log in and do this? And I said, no, they're already there. I got new machines up and running with the new certificates. Same thing, they said, well, is this okay? And it's like, yeah. And my part was done pretty quickly, because I got those things up and running and just cycled them in. And I didn't have to get on the machine, make sure that I do the certificate right, make sure I ran the right PowerShell script or everything. It was just a couple clicks, done. That's what DevOps brings you, is it brings you the chance to bring less failure into the process.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is fully my space, but not necessarily the foundation or the setup for that, but what you did that day was all built out on a nice web page, probably, right? You probably went into Azure, Key Store, wherever, secure storage, right? Clicked a button, it uploaded the new file, and killing those old nodes and bringing up new ones. That may have also been just like a button.
Yeah, it was just a couple clicks on the AWS console. I mean,
Right.
pretty straightforward stuff. And yeah, so if you set up the process right, then it should be simpler. It shouldn't be more complicated. It should actually be simpler. It might be complicated to figure out how to get it to the simpler level. That's kind of an interesting dichotomy or whatever,
Right.
But
All right. Well, we still don't have any questions. If you have any closing statements, we can put them in now.
okay, yeah, just thank you very much for attending. I appreciate it very much. And go forth and improve your processes, collaborate, and implement your DevOps.
All right. Well, thank you, Daniel. That was really a great talk. We're always happy to have you on here. And to everyone on the call, thank you for joining us today. The recording of the session will be available next business day, so Monday, from our virtual events page. That's improving.com /virtual-events. I can post that link real quick. And that's everything. So everyone have a great weekend. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jordan.
Thank you.